Welcome. Today is part 2 of our series on blending real lighting with Unreal's composure. And below I have the finished scene that we're going for. So I've got my head on a stick Bob. Say hello everyone. So Bob is my real life actor that I'm filming with my Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera. I've got some color charts on him so that I can make sure the colors are correct and everything is calibrated. And next to him, I have a real life gray sphere that I'm using to just check the lighting. And then on the right hand side, I have the Unreal mannequin and a fake gray sphere. Now, as you can tell, the gray spheres are maybe slightly off, but they're really, really close. And they're about as close as we're going to get for this tutorial. So the whole thing is we're going to take an HDRI image, take some the Unreal mannequin, and our real life footage, and we're going to blend it all together. So my name is Jake G. Water. This is the Virtual Production Indie Film Guide. All right, so as usual, what I do every tutorial as much as possible is just to start again so that you can see every step. So this video is not going to be super quick. I'm just going to go through every single step. Now, there are parts of this, like setting up composure and a few other things, that I'm not going to go into detail on because I have covered them in other videos. And whenever I speed past something like that, what I'll do is I'll just make a note of it that you can check out the other video. So this one is sort of standing on top of several other things that we have set up. And this is more like an advanced maneuver of tweaking the lighting. I'm not really going into detail of how composure is set up and not going into detail of the color transforms that we're going to use. Okay, all right, I am going to create a new film, television, and live events project. Just blank is fine. I like to turn ray tracing on, do as you would like. And I'm going to call this HDRI 3. This is my third attempt. All right, so here is our blank project. There's, you look around, there's not much there. What I'm going to do, though, is because of the way HDRIs work, I'm just going to delete everything and start again. We want really precise control over our lighting at this step. And if we accidentally have something in the project that's affecting the lighting, it might take us a while to track it down and figure out where the error is coming from. So just delete everything. And then what we're going to do is the first thing is add an HDRI backdrop. So I like to go over here and with it selected, just center it so that it's at 0, 0, 0. And if you've never used an HDRI before, I'll give you a quick tour. It's just a 360 photo using the HDR format. And if we zoom out, we can actually see that this photo has been projected onto like a dome. Like this is like a Truman show. It's got a fake sky and fake ground and everything. And you can also tell that as you walk over to the fringes, it all looks stretched. Now that's okay because HDRIs are intended to be used from this center point, and they actually look fine here because that's the perspective that they were taken with. So if I look around here, this probably means I'm slightly off. There we go. The closer we are to the center of where the photo was taken, the better. Now there are some adjustments to tweak the geometry of this HDRI, but if you're at the dead center, it doesn't matter that much, and we're not going to wander from the dead center in this video. So just looking around, it looks perfect. Now, this is the one that comes with Unreal, but we can actually head over to HDRI Haven, which is a wonderful site. And over here, you can click on HDRIs and you can download any other one. Now, I didn't know this at first, but I want to explain it. An HDRI is a little different from a 360 photo because in a 360 photo, like a PNG file, for example, that's only going from like a 0 to 255 as like the light intensity, like each pixel is 0 to 255. But an HDRI is not bounded in the same way. Each pixel is 32 bits, or each color intensity is 32 bits, and a 32-bit float. So what that really means is you have almost unlimited dynamic range. So it's not uncommon for an HDRI file to go from like a 0.0001 for a really dark patch to like 30,000 or more wherever the sun is located. Okay, I'm just gonna look through these and pick one that I like. Let's go with this. No, I don't like that. This one here, abandoned. Yeah, let's try this one. This one looks all right. I've never tried this one before. I'm going to download the 4K texture, and as you see, it's opened Affinity Photo. This is a good opportunity. Let me just show you the HDRI. So I'm going to pick the color picker tool, and if I hold it down, it actually shows me the pixel values, and maybe I can show you what I mean. So over here, look, it's just normal. Okay, 0.12. Like this would be a 0 to 1 scale, you're thinking, right? Like, okay, that's dark, 0.02, something that's brighter is closer to 1, 0.55. Now let's hover over the sun and see what happens. Okay, we're over 1, but as we get to the center, 12, 15, 64, 48, 7,000. Like, let's even zoom really close to the center of the sun and see what it is. 100, 160,000. Like, these numbers are getting really, really high really quickly. So that's kind of the difference between how an HDRI is encoded. And Unreal is going to actually use this light information and say, oh, the sun is really bright. I should use that to light my scene and not the things near it that are not nearly as bright. So notice this is a really blue sky. If it was lighting the scene from the blue sky and not the sun, everyone would be very blue. So that's why these HDRI files are in a very specific format. Okay, I'm going to close this though and hide that. And let's import the HDRI to here. So where did we download it? Here we go. Okay, there's our HDRI, and I'm just gonna drop it in. But what happens is you look around and you go, why is it all lower resolution? And that's just if you go to the Unreal documentation on this, they will tell you the problem. And the problem is that you have to go in here and turn this to no MIP maps, and then also go in here and raise this to the quality of the image, so 4096. So we want it to use the full texture size. And anytime I do this, especially with a 4096 size image, Unreal takes a second to compute it. And then you can probably leave everything else the way it is. I don't, like this wants to be no sRGB because it's a linear. And I would probably leave everything else how it is. We can fix any problems at another stage. Okay, so here's our HDRI, and notice that it's looking a lot better. And if we go into here and go to visualize, or is it HDRI, we can actually like inspect around. And this blue line is, I think, what does the blue line mean? Min-max or something like that? But you can kind of see in the middle here that the lux of the sun is quite high. I hate that it's white on white, but this is a cool tool to look around and inspect the like brightness of an image. All right, so let's turn that off. We might use that later. Why don't we bring a character into here? So I want to bring that Unreal mannequin, and I can do that this way. Just have to import the third-party content. And I will also put them at 0, 0, 0. There we go. Let's also bring in a cinema camera. And I'll put it at 0, 0, 0 and then raise it up because it's in the ground right now. It's about 155 centimeters. And then it's literally in the head of this person. So I'm going to bring them back. And I just want to have a look at where the camera and the sun is because I don't want to be backlit. Okay, the sun's there. So what I'm going to do is maybe move this camera over this way. So let's move it here. Like I just don't want the camera pointing directly into the sun. And then rotate it. There we go. And then I guess I'll turn this guy around. All right, so there is our there's our kind of shot. And don't worry about the lighting levels yet. We're just setting everything up. And next we want to import our composure or create our composure. So I talk about how to do this in detail in another video, which I'll link there. I'm just going to speed through this. Import the composure. Now we need 3 layers. One is the CG layer that we just created. And it by default found the right camera. And notice how this is blurry. I actually like turning depth of field off, because I think we can fix this in post-production if we want to add depth of field effects. I'm going to leave that for now. Next, I'm going to add a media plate layer and leave it all at the default name. Okay, now I need to import my the video footage from my Blackmagic camera. And that is coming over my deck link. And I think it's I think it's 1. Pretty sure it's 1. And then this is also 10-bit. Save that. And if everything worked, I should be able to just drag and drop this into the scene. And it did not work. Okay, what is the problem? Oh, it is working now. I don't know what I did. Okay, so here's my scene. That's the person we're going to composite with this little ball here. So let's go finish our media plate. The input is the thing we just created. There we go. And I have it set to come in as sRGB linear. So the camera is actually outputting the color space that Unreal wants. In another video, I said that you could transform it to Rec 709, and I had an issue with that. The transform wasn't undoing itself the correct way. I think there was a problem. So I instead opted to have the camera send sRGB linear directly, and I'm gonna stick with that. Okay, now let's key it. So we're gonna chroma key this, and I will admit I don't have the best green screen setup, but I like to eyeball the chroma key kind of this way. I just move it around until I lock into something that really gets the job done. And I like to make it as high on these sliders as possible, because I feel like that will conflict with the fewest number of other colors. Okay, that looks pretty good. Let's also go in and, what is it? De-vignette. That pulls those little fringes out. You see that? Whoop. And then I just mess around with these kind of to see if they, now I'm going to set that back to default. Actually, all of these are pretty good. I will have to despill it. So despilling will remove the green color from the fringes, and then also erode. And erode, you can see there's kind of that, now there's that like white halo around me. And this is the one that I usually use. I don't know if there's a better knob to turn. Whoop. I like to pull it in until I don't have that halo. So probably go with that. All right, close enough is good enough. And then we want to put these put this composition together. So let's create a new composition material. This is a post-process volume. You don't have to do that, but I like to highlight only the thing I need. 2D param. And this is CG element 1. Needs to be the same name as whatever is in your composition. So this is media plate 1. And I like to put the media plate on the top because I like to sort of do it in order of how they're being applied. Because this is going to be over this piece. Save that. And then drop it in. Whoops, I clicked this toggle element rendering. All right, there's our composition. And I'm not going to add a garbage matte because I don't need to, but you can see the green screen is a little bit off. So let's go back and tweak it. Go back to the chroma keyer. Oh, there we go. And then maybe let's pull the black clip up. It's too high. So I'm staring at this second swatch on the bottom. I know you can't see where I'm pointing, but all right. It's a little rough, but it's good. It's pretty good. Like I said, I think I haven't really fine-tuned my green screen setup, and I imagine most people who are doing this have a much better green screen setup. So if I can make the lighting look good, you'll be able to make it look much better. Now, we don't need this media plate in the background, so I'm going to hide that. Okay, and I guess I'm gonna turn my camera slightly because I want them like next to each other. So where's my camera? Camera, and then rotate it maybe like that. And then I'll rotate this person so that maybe they're facing in a bit. That way I can get like these shadows. Alrighty. Okay, good stuff. So we've got the composure set up, and we've got the HDRI set up. And we want to add one more thing, which is a directional light. Doesn't matter where you place it, but sometimes I just like to see the arrows of the directional light. So I kind of put it right above where I'm working, like 200 or maybe 400. I can just look up. Okay, perfect. And okay, so we've got all the pieces we need. Oh, one more piece for the composure tab. Sorry, we're not quite done. I want to output this to a screen that I can view. So Blackmagic Media out, Blackmagic Media out. And I have that on 4. So my Blackmagic card has 4 slots, and I'm outputting this over the 4th cable. And then in my composure, I can add this output here. And right now it looks terrible because I got this tone mapping path on. I want to use OpenColor.io. And OpenColor.io, I talk about that right here. So go check that out, OCIO and OpenColor.io. And this is how you would do color transformation. This is OCIO is the standard way for doing color space transforms, and it's probably the only one you should be using. So if Unreal is trying to do it, I would tell it, nope, I got OCIO. But OCIO you have to download separately, and then go point it to the config, and then import all the color spaces you're going to use. So I'm using Rec 709, and linear sRGB is the space of Unreal, so I actually only need these 2 for now. There are other color spaces you'll use in other situations. So let's drag this in, and we're going from linear to Rec 709. All right, that looks much better on my monitor, although I haven't adjusted the lighting levels, so it does still look like crap. The other thing I like to check on is auto exposure. So this is for the viewport. I actually like to turn this on, even though everyone says turn it off, because I don't want to be constantly fiddling with my viewport. I just want it to be look good all the time. I will go into my camera and change the settings as I need to. Okay, one more thing actually over here is I need to go into this CG element, and in transform compositing passes, there's these color grade settings. So if I were to change this, notice how the white balance of this composure is changing. But I actually like to turn this off, this override settings, and then all of that is now just contained in the camera actor. It's just, I don't like changing things in the camera and being like, why aren't they changing? And it's because it's being overridden somewhere else. So this is going to give me the most control. I said in my part 1 of this video that we wanted a way to color calibrate things separately. where we're not trying to match them together, but we're matching them to a predefined standard. And that standard was the ACES specification. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go back and watch part 1 right there. Okay, so in ACES, it said that in a linear color space, your 18% gray card should be 0.18. So that is this right here. And notice that when I hover over this with my mouse, there's an R, G, and a B value in the lower right of this display. So what we're going to use is this display as sort of our source of truth. In the end, we don't care what the light settings are going to be in any other part of Unreal, as long as this thing here is showing the right values, because it's this is what we're going to render from. So this is all that matters, because this is the end result. Now, okay, let's see. Now, if I wanted to change this, I would actually just go to my camera and change it. And it says 0.17, so it's a little dark. I'm going to try making it a little bit brighter. All right, so here is my camera setup with Bob in the background, the gray ball, the green screen. You can tell there's a bit of green spill in this room because it's not super big. And here is my camera. Let me take it off false color mode. So this is what it's seeing, and then I'm going to turn false color on because I want to show you something. So in the Blackmagic, when you turn false color on, the middle gray swatch should actually come in as green. So I'm adjusting my iris there, you can see. And as I adjust it, the histogram goes up and down. At a certain point, the middle gray swatch becomes green. So it's kind of up to you. There's probably like a third of a stop range in there where you could say, well, those are both green. So what I like to do is go up, because if you can see my histogram there, we're pretty low on the histogram. So I'm just going to go up. Maybe back it off from there. So let's try that. Yeah, so this is how I would dial it in here. And then if you are outputting sRGB linear, that's what I'm doing over here, it should come out as 0.18 on the other side. So this green is 0.18 in Unreal. All right, so this is like 0.18, 0.19. I would call that done. The other thing you might want to check is just go around this card, especially on the white patches, and make sure that everything is between 0 and 1. But more specifically, this white should be around like 89, and the black part, like, so these are keyed out, so they're going to be 0. Like the green screen keyer has destroyed them. But go to this black swatch, and you want this to be around 0.03 to 0.05, I would say. And that's indeed what we're getting. The way the ACES specification works is basically if you have a card that is like diffusely reflective or reflective, like not a mirror. So it could be, there's a glossy swatch on here, but what I mean is if you calibrate this card to the 18% gray value at 0.18, then everything on the card should be between 0 and 1, because 0 and 1 is like the least and most that something can reflect according to how the ACES specification is encoding color. It doesn't mean that you can't have higher or lower values. And when I say 0 and 1, what I really mean is this 0.03. So it's actually between 0.03 and about 0.9. And then anything below that 0.03, like 0.0001 or something, is something that is, it has to be in a darker light than the light you calibrate it against. Otherwise, it's not really physical. It's not like a physically accurate light level. Similarly, you can have things that are even over 1. They can be, there's no upper limit. You can have things that are 50. All that means it is a light source, or it is reflecting from a light source that is brighter than the one you calibrated your gray card against. So what really matters is just after we calibrate, things in the same light shouldn't go outside of those like 0.04 to 0.9 levels. But anything in different lighting, it doesn't matter. Okay, so I would call this calibrated, meaning we're not going to have to come back and adjust any settings on our real life image. There is one thing I want to look at though, and that is the contrast of the lighting in my real life scene. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to use this meter right here, and I'll get the color chart so I can show you what I'm going to do. So if you were in part one, then you saw me talk about contrast as well as matching brightness. And what I mean there is the difference between the ambient light level and the directional light. Sometimes key and fill could be used as these words, but ambient light is sort of like what everything is minimally lit at. So it's really hard for anything to be below that. And then directional light is only something that's being directly hit by your main light source. So what I'm going to use is this color chart here, and I'm going to hold it in two new locations. So at first we hold it straight to the camera, and this is how I calibrate my exposure of the camera. So if I point this straight at the camera and you were to take a meter here, this should read 0.18 in a linear color space. But I'm going to do two new things. One, I'm going to point it directly at the light source, and I'm going to take a spot meter reading. So I look through it like this, and I'm pointing it like this. So actually so imagine the light source is like behind me, and this is pointing directly at that light source. So dead on, and then as close as possible to like reading it like this and not on an angle, you're gonna take a spot meter reading, and that will, on this meter, gives me candelas per square meter. That's like how bright that gray swatch is, the light that it's emitting. And it's a function of how bright the light is. So then afterwards, I'm gonna do this in a way where this is not being lit by the directional light at all, and take a similar reading. And I will calculate the ratio between those two numbers, and that's my contrast. So I'm gonna do that right now. So I'm holding this, maybe I should do it like this. So I held this directly to the sun, to whatever light is pretending to be the sun. And then I took an incident reader, and I got originally 300 candelas per square meter. Let me do it one more time. Okay, 300. You might want to do it a couple times just to get a average feel. And then this is in the light, and if I turn it this way, you see it now is covered in shadow, and this is not being lit by the directional light. So I'm going to take one more reading just of this. All right, so I took a couple readings, and that's 12 candelas. So we had 312. All right, so 312 is our contrast ratio. So 300 divided by 12 is 25:1. So that's pretty strong contrast. I've used this outside to calculate the contrast in direct sun, and yeah, it's about 22 to 25. So this is sort of simulating as if we're in direct sunlight. All right, so this is I would call this calibrated. So what we're going to try and do now is match this scene as best we can, and we're going to try and match it to that standard. Now, I have found that you still need to dial in both, but when you first calibrate them separately, you're way closer to dialing it in. And the way we're going to dial it in at the very end is with that gray ball. So first things first, I do need to match something up, which is, I want to make sure the sun is coming in the same direction. So you see I have a gray ball here. I'm going to flip that around to the chrome side. Okay, so now I'm on the chrome side, and notice that it has this point light source, which is really bright, and that's the location of the sun in our sky. So what I'm going to do is bring a mirror ball again into this Unreal scene, and just make sure the sun where the HDRI is lined up. So let me, if you go over here and you type a color calibrator, there's actually this thing that's already pre-made, and it's wonderful. So I'm going to drag it into the scene. Pull it up. And I'm going to rotate it until this mirror ball is the one kind of in the scene. It's a little big. Let's maybe make it closer to the size of the real life one. And I'll put it kind of next to it. Okay, so I don't know if you can tell, but we have way too many suns. And where are all those suns coming from? Well, we have the one in my studio, and then we have two in Unreal. One is coming from the HDRI. Let me turn this off. I I'll explain why it sort of didn't turn off later. But I have this directional light. So you can see the directional light is totally in the wrong spot. And also the reason why this HDRI thing gets a little complicated is there's actually, it's like a multi-component. There's a skylight and then the HDRI geometry and backdrop. And something to know is that all the lighting in the scene comes from the skylight. So if I click into skylight here, and then I were to turn the intensity down, you can see that's affecting the lighting in our scene, especially if I turn off the directional light. And then if I go over to here, which is the top component, I can also change intensity, and that primarily affects the HDRI picture, the photo in the background. Sorry, I tweaked this setting and now it's like locking up the computer for a second, so just give it a sec. So if I were to like zero it out. Okay, so this is a spot where before we start getting too far, I'm actually gonna go in, I'm gonna pause the sun calibration and fix a few settings that are gonna be in your way. Because I want very precise control of the lighting. So the first thing to do is your Cinecamera actor actually has this global illumination setting, and by default it's set to 1. See, I can turn it up or down, and see how it's affecting the scene. You want to turn that right to 0. The reason is if I turn all my lights off, I want no illumination. So just take care of that. Second thing, now let's go to the HDRI backdrop. And notice how if I remove that background HDRI, there's still sort of some lighting. Okay, we're gonna take care of this. So this piece here, like here, is the backdrop. And the skylight is actually what's lighting the scene from the HDRI image. And right now it's using this thing called SLS captured scene, where it's like looking at the scene and calculating like what the lighting properties should be. And that scene includes the backdrop. I'm actually gonna detach these two. So I'm gonna click this and click specified cube map. And I'm just gonna use the same HDRI. So it should be no change after you do this. But the reason I did this is because now the intensity here is actually decoupled from the background. So watch what happens if I turn the intensity like to 0. And then I go here. I can adjust this intensity of the backdrop without changing the intensity of my ambient light at all. In fact, notice how the only thing that is lighting up as I turn this up or down is the reflective surfaces. And the reason is because they're basically capturing a reflection from this backdrop, but they're not being lit. There's no illumination falling on these. They're only capturing a reflection. And before, it wasn't like that. As I turned the intensity of this backdrop up, it affected the lighting. And when you're dialing things in, I like having them all as separate switches. So you could even turn this off, and now watch what happens if I go here and then turn the intensity up. So now we are being lit. So that's why I like having them separate. One thing to keep in mind is if you rotate your HDRI, this is the one that affects like where the illumination point is, like this. But over here, you still have a let me turn the intensity back up. This rotates your HDRI, and the sun is going to show up in the reflection capture. So I don't know if you can see it, but there's a point sun, there's a reflected sun, and then there's also the directional sun. So now we have 3 suns. I went from 2 to 3, or 4. All right, we want these suns to just be wherever our studio light is. You can also just change your studio light to match the HDRI. It's up to you, they just have to match. But I've got my light set up in like one of the only good spots in this studio for a sun. So I'm gonna leave it there, and I'm gonna try and match everything else. So the first thing I'm gonna match is this one. So that's at about there, I would say. Okay, good. Okay, now let's go back to here. And next I'm gonna match my HDRI. So this one's a little finicky. I like typing in the 170. Ooh, 171. 170.5. And then if I turn the intensity down, yeah, okay, so my reflected sun is still there, and notice they're like almost completely on top. Like, oh, it's almost, it's just a little off, 171. All right, that's perfect. Okay, now they're completely overlapping. This is good stuff. All right, so those two suns are in the spot they need to be, and then this directional light, we also want to rotate it this way. And let's turn the intensity like really low. And in fact, I'm gonna, just to make sure I can line it up, I'm gonna turn this off and then just try to match this. Okay, notice that's slightly off and it's also a little high. Oop. All right, cool. So all of our suns are lined up. This is good stuff. Let me turn this background back on. Okay, next what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna close this comp and just look at the CG comp. So there's a couple things we need to worry about. We need to worry about the contrast, the white balance, and the brightness. So unfortunately, they all kind of like affect each other. So you can't always just go one to the next to the next. So just keep in mind that I'm going to bounce between all three of these techniques but I'm only going to be tuning each one in a specific spot. So there won't be like 1,000 tools for you to memorize. So let's just dial in the general let's see, what should we do? Okay, I know what I'm going to do. So the first thing I'm going to do is go show and back to that EV HDRI thing, because I'm going to use this reticle in the center to actually just match the values that I got from my my light meter in real life. Why not? It's arbitrary. You don't have to do it this way, but I have the numbers. It's going to be easiest to do it this way. So, and it doesn't even matter that this gray swatch is like 20% gray instead of 18. So what I want you to pay attention to is it's 0.196 nits. Now, nit and candela per square meter are the same unit. And when I read in the shadow side of the gray card, I got 12. So this needs to be almost 100 times stronger. So remember, ambient light is our skylight here. So let's just type like, I don't know, 200. All right, what are we getting now? 0.9. Oh, it needs to be way stronger. Whoops. Oh, that was angle. That would mess up the whole thing. Intensity, 200. All right, what is this now? 10 nits. Okay, we're getting close. 210. 220. 240. Perfect. Okay, don't worry that the scene's all blown out. We're just gonna fix this. So I brought up the ambient light level to about 13 nits, which is what it is in my room. Now I want to point this directly at the sun and get the directional light level. So what I'm actually going to do though is copy the rotation from here and then apply it to this calibrator. And the reason I did that is for directional light, so say I'm measuring this and the sun is pointing this way, or like this. So this is where I'll get the maximum reading, but if I start to angle it, I'll get different readings. And I angled this directly at my light, so I'm getting the full reading. So I want to do the same in Unreal. Okay, so let me just double check that this back side, or the non-lit side, is still reading 12 nits. This side is not in directional light, so it should all be the same. Yeah, it was reading 12 nits. Okay, this is pointing at the directional light though. And what is it reading? 94. Okay, now we need to bring that up if you remember the 300. So I'm going to click on the directional light. And the reason I did it this way is the ambient light affects the directional light. They're just added together. But the directional light doesn't affect the ambient light. So I did the one that affects both, and then I'm just going to tweak it with the directional light. So let's bring this intensity to like 100. So that brought it up to 100 nits, 500, 2,000, 3,000, getting close. So 295 nits, let's really dial it in. Yeah, okay. So 3,300 lux. So let's just check. Okay, that was 300, and let's go back over here again, 12 nits. So now we have the same type of contrast here as we did in real life. I'm gonna reset this back to its original orientation. And okay, everything looks blown out. That's okay, we have exposure compensation. One thing though that I'm gonna do is the HDRI is like it's so dark in comparison that, you know, you can't see it, but notice how like you can see here, they're like way out of whack. So we can fix that. Let's just bring this up to like, I don't know, 300, 200. Okay, so I'm just noticing that, look at the histogram. It's around here. It's around this spot. When I bring it up, I guess I should bring it to around the same level. So if I bring it to like 20, notice that it's here now. But I want to bring it up. So like 50, 80, 100, 500, 800, 1,200, 2,000, 4,000. All right, that sort of feels like they're all together now. Like the histograms feel in the same spot. I don't have a scientific way for doing that, but I'm just kind of eyeballing it. We can always fix it later. Okay, what are we gonna do next? Let's try white balancing. So always use your comp, and let's move this color calibrator so it's closer to the center of the camera. Also turn the EV thing off. There we go. So bring this in. I'm gonna turn off snapping. It is not gonna help right now. All right, so to white balance, you just hover over any of these swatches, and then in the bottom, look at the values of the numbers there. And oh my God, they're all perfectly white balanced. Oh, I think I know why. I think it's because the sun is, I think the sun setting, the directional light, this directional light is set to 6,500 Kelvin, or that's its like default setting is pure white. And it's so strong that it's overriding any of the like tone of the HDRI image. Well, this is perfect because we want to be white balanced. Okay. There is a chance that, like, let me turn this off. There's a chance that your HDRI hasn't been white balanced. So this is now just being lit directly from the HDRI image. And I noticed that the white balance is slightly off, but I think it's close enough that I'm not going to worry. If your like HDRI image is also not white balanced, then I would say you might have some, like you might run into a situation where the HDRI image is not matching the light coming from your directional light. And how you can adjust that is I would go into the directional light and then use this to adjust the temperature. So if your HDRI was an internal light, that might only be like 5,500 Kelvin or 3,400 Kelvin. That's just an area to tweak for you to know. But I'm going to put this back to 6,500, which is like peak daylight, which is sort of the scene we're in anyway. Okay, so we're white balanced. The next thing is we want to bring the gray, we want to calibrate against a gray card, and we want to calibrate it against the gray card facing the camera. This can mean there are darker and lighter spots, but in general, you put the gray card where your talent is going to be, or whatever you want to be, like the calibrated point in the scene, point it towards your camera, and that is that is now the calibrated scene. Now, all that really matters is that we're doing it the same in real life and here. So we're approximately at the same position. This is a 20% gray swatch. It should be 0.202. So it's 0.38. It's too high. Where do we fix it? Go to the camera and type exposure. All right, so what I want you to do first is turn all three of these on. And then change this to manual, because we're going to manually calibrate it. And then uncheck apply physical camera exposure. So this, don't worry about that, but this is going to say ignore looking at your aperture setting. That's another setting in this camera. It's going to say ignore looking at shutter, ISO, all that. It doesn't matter. Those are for physical cameras. Now, you could try to do like a physically based like setup here, and it should work. But in the end, you might have to tweak a few dials anyway. So I'm just cutting out all of that and just saying, just tweak the dials. And now the only thing we need to adjust is this exposure compensation. And it doesn't matter what number this is. It's now a physically meaningless unit. It's just whatever Unreal treated as 0 is 0 and 1. Like, don't worry about it. This could be minus 100. You're fine. All that matters is that this reads the number it should. So what I'm going to do is click in here, hover my mouse over here, and then just start hitting numbers until it's 0.202. So it's 0.23. We need to bring it down a little more. Let me try minus 10. Okay, we're at 0.13. We're way too dark, so minus 9.5. Okay, we got to go a little brighter, so less exposure compensation. Okay, now a little darker, a little more. And this is dead on. Look at it, 0.202, like almost across the board. Now let's do a quick check. We don't want anything to be over 1, 0.9, and 0.38. I would say this is actually a little high, so I'm going to pull it down a little bit more. Okay, that feels a little more comfortable. This might be an 18% gray swatch, I'm not sure. You can always create your own material if you want. Okay, so I have done contrast, and I've calibrated the camera exposure compensation and the white balance. So let's hide this, and let's see what happens if we just put our comp together. So I would make the argument that it's like, look at the shadows, the darkness of the shadows, the brightness of the bright. So they're a pretty good match. I want to go back to my HDRI and tune this in a bit. So I feel like the HDRI is actually too bright. Okay, yeah. I think this is more realistic. I'm just tuning it in by eye. If you shot the HDRI, you could probably also capture some readings about the scene, which is what I would do. But I don't have those readings for this scene, so I'm just doing it by eye. I'm looking at my Rec 709 output and tweaking it until it looks right. Now, I would expect that the forest in the background is like almost completely black. Just the highlights are coming through. And I'm going to go with this. I think this is sort of like light calibrated, I would say. I eyeballed some of it. All right, we're ready for the last stage. So I'm going to flip the chrome sphere to the gray side. Alrighty. So that is the sphere on the 18% gray side. And now I'm going to recreate the same object in Unreal. Now, you could say, why not just use this? But where is it? We have one here. This one. See this one here? But what I have found is that I actually have to go in and tweak the materials a little bit. So I'm going to create a new material and then sub out for this 18% gray material right here. So material, middle, or call this the gray ball. And I'm going to create a parametric material. So first, let's just create the 18% gray 0.18, 0.18, 0.18, and feed that into the base color. Now, metallic is 0 by default. Don't touch it. But what I am going to do is add parameters to the specular and roughness. And I don't know if we need a normal map. I haven't tried that yet. Default value. I'm going to put the default value of this to 0.5 and the default value of the roughness to 0.5 as well. Now make a material instance of this and then drop it. If you've got this selected, sub out the gray ball. Now see this changed slightly? Here, let me undo it. Watch again. It's going to change. It's a little more reflective. And now let's pull up that comp again. So let's move this chart. I want the gray balls to be side by side. So let's move this. All right. So first thing I would do is actually pop open the material instance and then check these values. And then I would play with them a little until you feel like you're looking at the same material. So this is obviously too shiny. This is too smooth. It's sort of somewhere around there, I would say. And then I would do the same with the specularness. All right, I feel those are pretty close. So I'm going to close that. And now just it's a eyeball type of thing. In fact, I want to make sure the shadows on this, I want to make sure nothing else is casting a shadow on that gray ball on the front. So I wonder if I can, maybe I'll just add a sphere. I'm going to add an isolated sphere. So let's add a sphere to the scene and move it up. Call this, gray ball, and just try to match it. Just as close as possible. I like to bring it up. Got it. Oh. I think I'm like too close. I don't, well, maybe does it matter? Maybe that's the size it's supposed to be. I like to be as accurate as possible. Okay, so that's too close to the camera. So let's move it to where it needs to go. Whoop. Oh, there. All right. And then drop that material on it. All right. Maybe it's a bit big. Make it a little smaller. And I would make the argument they're pretty close to begin with, but I do notice that the shadow's a little harsher here. So let's just have a look at, let's hover over and look at some of the values. So peak brightness on this gray ball is about 0.5, and over here it's about 0.7. Okay, so what we might do is pull down the exposure a bit on the CGI side. And then on this side, 0.3, 0.02. Oh, so maybe the contrast is a little high. So what I'll do is pull down the directional light a little, maybe to 3200. Maybe a little more. I'm just looking at I'm just like, this is a final tweaking type of stage. And then the shadow is 0.02, 0.03. Okay, it's about the same, but the softness of this shadow, because I think my light source is wider. It's like softening the shadow, and the sun is more of like a hard light. So I don't know, either I need to fix my lighting in the studio, or I need to, like, you know, tweak this, but I'll show you where you could tweak it. So this source angle here, I think if we make this bigger, like 5 or 50, yeah, see, this kind of softens it, but it ruins this over here, which is not what we want. So let's reset that. What if we soften it here? Does that do anything? Like 50? No, it just softens the middle. Did I move the sun by accident? It looks like I have 2 suns, but I'm not going to worry about that too much. This is, sorry, source angle is like how big the sun appears. So if I took like 800 and I were to like move to the directional light, maybe it doesn't show up there, but it will show up, I guess it's showing up in this reflection here. I don't know if I can do anything about this shadow. I also said that shadow matching was an advanced topic, so I'm going to leave this. And yeah, so there you go. Why don't I get into the scene just so you can see how it looks? Let me turn our mannequin friend towards where I'll be standing. And it's always creepy when he moves like that. And then get rid of the gray ball. And then, yeah, let's give it a try. I'm just trying to figure out where he would be. Like that? Oh, there. I'm too far forward, I think. No, I haven't tried Unreal 5. Yeah, I hear it's awesome. Well, I'm still working through 4.26, okay? Thank you. Yes, I heard blah, blah, blah. Well, I hope that looked good. Yeah, so that's everything. Definitely, if you haven't checked out part 1, I talk a lot about the theory of this. So go back and check it out. And thanks for joining me. I'm Jake G. Water, and this is the Virtual Production Indie Film Guide.